Vethril-Kor pressed his palms flat against the viewport glass. The observation deck smelled of recycled oxygen and chemical deodorant. It was the same as every other room on the patient market. Every Mirathi ship he had ever served on felt the same. The human fleet drifted into the outer edge of the system. It looked like debris from an unfinished wreck. 3 ships, maybe 4, it was hard to count them. They refused to hold a consistent shape. The largest vessel dominated the formation. It looked like someone had taken a dozen ships from a dozen species and crushed them together. The result was then dared to fly. Protrusions jutted at wrong angles. A section of hull gleamed with Mirathi alloy. It buted against something else. The material resembled gemery crystalwork. The engine assembly was a slap of mismatched thrusters. None of them were the same design or size. Ugly, that was the only word Vethril had for it. Hideous and profoundly wrong. His fingers tapped against the glass in a rhythmic sequence. 3 beats, a pause, 4 beats, a pause. The pattern helped him organize the sensory chaos. His mind could then process it. Trade speaker Lysatharven did not share his patience. Lysatharven strode onto the observation deck with heavy-footed impatience. He was a being. He believed his time was more valuable than physics. He drummed his tattooed fingers against the door frame. "How long, observer? I need a number." Vethril did not turn from the viewport. The newcomers were not military. Their ships carried no standard weapons emplacements. They had no formation discipline. They were refugees. That should have made them simple. Refugees were predictable. Flee, beg, scatter, die. These ones did not scatter. "They are still assessing our position," Vethril said. "Their scans are passive. They are waiting to see what we do." Lysatharven let out a sharp breath. "I do not need a behavioral analysis. I need evaluation. Are they assets or are they salvage? My syndicate has trade routes to protect and contracts to fulfill. I cannot file a delay report because some observer wants to watch the primitives drift." Vethril turned, met the trade speaker's black eyes. Lysatharven's corporate tattoos rippled on his neck as he clenched his jaw. "They are humans. I know what they are." The trade speaker's fingers drummed faster, a broken remnant from a dead world. Their home system went dark 80 cycles ago. Nothing left but these scattered fleets and whatever colonies failed to thrive. They are not a civilization. They are a stain. A warning light pulsed red on the main console. Single flash, steady rhythm. Emergency channel open. Vethril looked back at the viewport. The human frigate, the smallest ship in their formation, was venting atmosphere. A white plume of frozen gas erupted from its engine section. The plume caught the system's distant starlight. It turned into a brief, beautiful cloud. Decompression, critical. The ship yawed sideways, its internal pressure bleeding into vacuum. Lysatharven stepped up beside him. "There. That one is salvage. Finally something useful. We can claim salvage rights under the Open Space Convention before the gemery get here." Vethril watched, waited. Within minutes, a second human ship broke formation. It was a boxy, graceless thing with too many lights tacked onto its exterior. It moved toward the damaged frigate with an urgency bordering on recklessness. It latched on within seconds of arrival. The salvage ship did not dock properly. It did not extend a boarding tube or align its airlock. Instead, a cutting torch ignited at the end of a mechanical arm. Bright orange, hot enough to see the metal glow through the viewport. "They are cutting into their own ship," Lysatharven said. His voice had shifted, still dismissive, but now with a note of something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Vethril said nothing. The mining laser carved a rough circle around the ruptured section. The damaged hull plate fell away, spinning into the dark. Atmosphere still bled from the gap, but slower now. The pressure differential was equalizing. Then the salvage ship did something Vethril could not follow. It extended a second arm, clamped onto a piece of debris floating nearby. It was a hatch, an airlock door. Vethril recognized the alloy composition from the geometric etchings on the surface. It was a root-mined airlock made by the reclusive crystalline species, heavy, durable. It was designed for a species breathing ammonia, not oxygen. The salvage ship dragged the hatch across the gap, maneuvered it into the hole the laser had cut, and welded it in place. Vethril's fingers stopped tapping. The entire operation took 12 minutes. Vethril counted, 12 minutes from decompression to seal. The frigate should have been dead in space. It should have bled its crew into the void. Now it had a root-mined airlock bolted into its side. The human ships began transmitting again. Data streams, system checks, and then a sound, loud, abrupt. An echo filled the observation deck speakers. Vethril felt his spines tighten before he recognized it. Laughter, a human voice, laughing over an open channel. Lysitharven recoiled. What is that? Is that an attack? A laugh, Vethril accessed the cultural database. It was an expression of amusement, positive affect. The humans were laughing about something. They had just watched their ship almost die. They had patched the hole with a foreign piece of metal, and now they were laughing. He opened the Mirathi psychological profile on the human species. The file was sparse. Only 17 entries. Most were from third-party encounters with other species. The Gemmery had recorded a brief interaction. The Abyssals had refused to engage at all. What the file contained: high emotional volatility, mood shifts without apparent cause. They engaged in ritualized risk-taking. These behaviors served no survival function. They had a concept called art. It seemed to involve creating patterns and objects with no utilitarian purpose. The only other species engaging in such activity were the root mind, and they were incomprehensible. Vethril read further. Humans formed attachments to inanimate objects. They gave names to their ships and weapons. They decorated their living spaces with colors and shapes. They told each other stories about events that had never happened. Lysitharven was still talking, something about salvage rights and market value. Vethril stopped listening. A new transmission appeared on the tactical display. Video feed, low resolution. The image was grainy and unstable. It showed the interior of the damaged frigate. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across a narrow corridor. And there, standing at a viewport, a human child. Small, pale, holding a colored stick. The child was drawing on the inside of the glass. Slow, deliberate strokes. An image took shape, a flower with too many petals. The proportions were wrong. The stem curved at an unnatural angle. Any Mirathi child would have recognized the inefficiency of the design. The child finished the drawing, stepped back, and looked directly at the camera. Vethril felt something move in his chest, a pressure he could not name. The child raised a hand, waved at the Mirathi ship, at the observation deck, at him. There was no survival value in this behavior. The child was not signaling a threat, not requesting aid, not gathering information. The child was producing an unnecessary image, then acknowledging the presence of an unknown vessel with a gesture. It communicated nothing. It was pure, useless, creative. And it terrified Vethril-Kor more than a weapon would have. He could predict a weapon. Every species had weapons. Every species understood threat and response. But this behavior had no logic he could map, no pattern he could analyze. The newcomers were not broken refugees running on instinct and fear. They were something else. Lysitharven laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. They repair their ships with scrap and their minds with nonsense. They are not a threat. Vethril did not laugh. He moved to the terminal and filed his official assessment. Standard format, standard language. It recommended caution in any engagement with the refugee fleet. It flagged their technical improvisation as an unpredictable variable. Then he opened his personal log, private, encrypted, no access except by his own neural signature. He typed a single line. They are not broken. They are waiting for something. He closed the log. The human child was still visible on the view screen, still standing at the window, still holding the colored stick. The flower with too many petals was starting to smear as the glass fogged from the child's breath. Vethril watched, and he did not know what he was watching for. An alarm blared in short, urgent bursts on the bridge of the last argument. The air smelled of unwashed bodies, hot circuitry, and recycled protein. Each pulse was a hammer strike against the skull. Vethril-Kor pressed his palms flat to the tactical display and watched the numbers shift. Lysitharven stood beside him, but only in the physical sense. The trade speaker's attention was fixed on the main viewer. Commander Solen Brecken's face hung there in frozen stillness as the ultimatum ended. The transmission had been clean, precise, absolutely final. Surrender all proprietary technology, hand over half the fleet assets. Safe passage would be granted through Mirathi space. The silence stretched long enough for Vethril to count 14 of his own heartbeats. Then Brecken spoke. Her voice was flat and cold, like a blade drawn slowly from a sheath. We will not be acquired. Lysitharven's fingers drummed against his forearm. 3 quick beats, A pause, 3 more. His corporate tattoos seemed to darken against his neck. The ink shifted with irritation. "They are nothing," he said. "A remnant they will fold." Vethril said nothing. He had seen the humans weld a salvaged airlock into a dying ship in 12 minutes. He had watched them refuse to let their people die. That was not the behavior of a species that folded. Lysitharven gave the order. A security detail launched from the patient market. A boarding shuttle cut a clean trajectory toward the last argument's main docking bay. 12 armed Mirathi. Standard pacification protocol. Non-lethal suppression, then confiscation of assets. The shuttle docked, the seals engaged. Vethril watched the tactical feed from the patient market's bridge. He tried to ignore the cold pooling in his stomach. Solène Brecken stood at the center of her bridge and listened to the metal scream. The docking clamps had engaged wrong. The Mirathi shuttle had latched onto a port designed for a route-mined vessel. It was a mismatch of fittings and tolerances. They ground against each other like mismatched teeth. The sound was terrible. She did not flinch. Chief Engineer Tobin Wash stood at the weapons station. His hands hovered over the console. His knuckles were split. Grease had worked itself into the cracks until it looked like part of his skin. "Commander," he said, "they're through the outer lock." Solène did not turn. She watched the tactical display. 12 Mirathi signatures, moving in standard clearing formation. Predictable textbooks. She had read their textbooks. She had read everything they had. "Power status?" she asked. Tobin's voice cracked. "Life support is down to 40% in the docking section. If I pull more, the forward berths lose heat." "Do it." He hesitated. 1 second. 2. Then his hands moved across the console and the bridge temperature dropped. Vethril-Kor felt the change through the tactical feed. A cold crept into the data stream like a slow current. The ambient temperature on the last argument had fallen by 11 degrees. The humans were bleeding heat from their own ship. Lysitharven noticed too. "They are freezing themselves," he said. "Why?" Vethril did not answer. He was watching the power routing. The mining laser had been salvaged from a Gemery excavation rig. The technology was designed to cut through crystalline rock at extreme depths. It had no business being mounted on a warship. It did not even have proper cooling systems. The humans had bolted it to the hull. They ran power cables through a converted atmospheric processor. Tobin Wash armed it anyway. The beam cut through the Mirathi boarding shuttle in 1.7 seconds. The explosion was silent in vacuum. On the tactical feed, the shuttle simply ceased to exist as a coherent object. 12 Mirathi signatures became debris. Lysitharven howled. The sound was raw and terrible. It was a noise from somewhere deep in his chest. He slammed his fist against the console and demanded a full military response. Ship weapons, missiles. A broadside to strip the human flagship down to its frame. Vethril grabbed his arm. "Look," he said. On the tactical feed, the remaining Mirathi inside the last argument were not retreating. They were dying. But the humans were not killing them in any way Vethril understood. A human with a plasma cutter sliced through a pressure seal. He then used the tool as a weapon, swinging it in an arc. The arc bisected a Mirathi soldier at the waist. Another person had opened an inner bay door. The atmosphere vented into a corridor, creating a wall of kinetic force. It sent 3 Mirathi tumbling into a bulkhead hard enough to crack their carapaces. These were not tactical decisions. They were instinctive responses born of a survival drive. It had no regard for doctrine or proportion. "They are not fighting to win a battle," Vethril said. His voice was steady, but he could hear the tremor beneath it. "They are fighting to prove a point, and they have made it." Lysitharven stared at him. The rage was still there, but something else was creeping in. Recognition, fear. "What point?" he demanded. Vethril pointed to the main viewer. The tactical feed had zoomed in on the last argument's bridge. Commander Brecken stood at the center of her command. But beside her was a human woman Vethril had not noticed before. She was visible through a crack in the blast shielding. She was pale, emaciated. Her eyes were fixed on something Vethril could not see, and she was smiling. It was not a happy smile. Her expression was cold and knowing. She had already accepted a cost and found it acceptable. In that moment, Vethril understood. She had wanted this, not the fight specifically, but the confrontation. She needed to show him their teeth. She needed him to stop seeing them as prey, because prey could be hunted. The woman on the bridge was a warning. Solène Brecken opened a channel. Her voice came through the speakers, flat and final. "The negotiation is over," she said. You may leave our space, or you may stay and learn what our desperation is worth. Lysitharven opened his mouth to respond, but Vethril was already moving. He crossed the bridge to the access terminal. He opened the restricted human database. The files had been recovered from a derelict archive. It was a data cache pulled from the wreckage of a colony ship. He had dismissed it as irrelevant during the initial assessment. Now he searched with a purpose. The phrase appeared across centuries of their literature. It was in their oldest stories, their most recent military doctrines, their private journals and public broadcasts. A single thread was woven through the entire tapestry of their recorded history. Survival was never about being the strongest. It was about being the most adaptable. Vethril read it 3 times. He turned to look at the tactical feed again. The woman was still smiling. The bridge was still cold. The refugees had just sacrificed their own heat to power a weapon. They had done it without hesitation. He had spent his entire career studying species, cataloging their behaviors, assessing their threat levels. He had believed the Mirathi system of evaluation was complete. He believed every variable could be accounted for and measured. He had been wrong. The Mirathi had made a terrible miscalculation about what humanity was capable of, and the evidence was still burning in the void between their ships. Solène Brecken pressed her palm to the glass case. The armory hummed around her. Her breath fogged in the cold air. Inside the case, the psychic assault matrix waited. Jagged blue crystals caught the faint emergency glow and threw it back in sharp fragments. The device looked like something a dead god had dropped and forgotten. This technology was a weapon of last resort. It focused a user's psionic potential into a devastating, uncontrollable wave. She had been saving it for a moment exactly like this. Tobin Wash came up behind her. His boots scraped on the grated floor. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Commander, that thing has killed 4 people in training, you know that. The feedback burns through the prefrontal cortex in under 3 seconds. Maya is not a soldier. She is a comms operator with a mild psionic rating." Solène did not turn around. She kept her eyes on the helmet. "The Mirathi will be back in less than 3 hours. They will bring a full corporate fleet, maybe a hunter-killer squadron from the Riven border. They have seen us cut their boarding party apart with mining lasers and vented atmosphere. They will not try to board us again. They will burn this ship from 10 kilometers away." "Then let them burn it." She turned to face him. "And where do we go after that, Tobin? The fleet scatters. We lose another 60% of what is left. We run for another decade and die cold and forgotten in the black. I am done running." Tobin opened his mouth, but the armory door slid open and Maya Fenn walked in. She moved with a strange stillness, her pale hands hanging loose at her sides. Her eyes looked tired but steady. She had heard everything. "I volunteer, Commander." Solène looked at her. She saw a woman. The decision was already made. There was no tremor in Maya's voice, no hesitation in her step. She had made peace with something. Solène herself had not yet accepted it. "Maya, you understand what this does." "Yes, I read the file." "The file tells you the numbers. The numbers do not tell you what it feels like." Maya walked past her to the glass case. She pressed her palm to the cool surface. "I know what it feels like to watch children freeze to death in the forward berths because we had to divert power to the shields. I know what it feels like to hear the decompression alarms and wait for the hull to tear open. I have been dying for 3 years, Commander. This is just a faster way to do something useful with the time." Tobin grabbed Solène's arm. His grip was hard, the grease under his nails pressed into her sleeve. "There has to be another way. We can jury-rig a void beacon pulse. We can overload the drive core and take half their fleet with us. We can." "We cannot," Solène said. She pulled her arm free. The beacon would draw the deep null entities. These were creatures from the space between realities, hostile and unknowable. The drive core would kill everyone on this ship. Maya's way is clean. It is precise. It buys us time. "It kills her." Solène closed her eyes. She let the silence sit for a second. Then she opened the case. The cold hit her face as the seal broke. The helmet rested on a bed of black foam. She lifted it carefully. The crystals caught the light and seemed to pulse with their own slow rhythm. The metal was cold against her fingers. She carried it to Maya. "Sit." Maya sat on a metal crate. She did not flinch when Solène lowered the helmet onto her head. The crystals touched her temples and a low hum started. It vibrated in Solène's teeth, in the bones of her skull. The smell of ozone bloomed sharp and clean in the cold air. Maya blinked once. Her hands gripped her knees. A muscle in her jaw twitched. You have one shot, Solen said. The Mirathi communication relay is on the far side of their command vessel. It coordinates the entire corporate fleet. Without it, they are blind. They cannot coordinate a response. They fall back to individual ship command, and that takes them 4 cycles to reorganize. 4 cycles, Maya repeated. Her voice was thin. 4 cycles gives us time to run, to hide, to find the others. Maya nodded. A single drop of blood ran from her nose and landed on her kneecap. She did not seem to notice. Tobin stepped forward. His face was pale. The veins stood out on his forehead. Maya, please, you do not have to do this. She looked at him. Her smile was small and sad, and she looked 20 years older. I know, Chief. That is why I am going to. She closed her eyes. The hum changed pitch. Solen felt it first in her chest. A pressure built behind her ribs. The air in the armory grew thick. Every loose particle of dust rose from the floor and hung suspended. The emergency lights flickered. Maya's back arched. Solen grabbed her hand. She held it tight. Maya's fingers were cold and her grip was crushing. The woman's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes were rolled back. The whites were filled with tiny blue veins spreading like cracks in ice. The psychic wave hit. Solen did not see it. She felt it. A pressure wave passed through her skull and left a ringing in her ears. The lights went out completely. The hum died. Silence. Then the sound came back, a scream from across the room. The Mirathi relay had been broadcasting on every channel the fleet used. The psychic burst rode those frequencies straight into the minds of every operator on the other end. Solen had no way to see it, but she knew what was happening. Mirathi minds were flooded with things they had no framework for. Human chaos, fear, art, love, violence, lullabies and screams wove together into a tapestry. No ordered species could process it. One of them heard a mother singing to a child she could not save. Another heard the sound of a welding torch cutting through a bulkhead, while people screamed on the other side. Another heard a joke, a stupid joke about a priest and a penguin. It made no sense in any language. It shattered something in that operator's brain because it was so alien, so pointless, so deeply and absurdly human. The relay went dark. Solen heard the silence on the tactical feed. The Mirathi command channel cut off mid-word. No orders, no coordination, just static and the sound of someone weeping in a language she did not speak. She turned back to Maya. The woman had stopped screaming. She sat on the crate with her hands loose in her lap. The helmet glowed faintly, then dimmed. Her face was slack. Her eyes were open. They stared at nothing. Solen knelt in front of her. She touched Maya's cheek. The skin was cold. Maya, can you hear me? No response. The eyes did not move. The chest rose and fell in a slow rhythm, but the thing that had been Maya Fen was gone. The matrix had burned it away. What remained was a body, a breathing shell, a price paid. Solen took Maya's hand. She held it between her own. She pressed her forehead to Maya's knuckles and whispered, I am sorry, I am so sorry. Tobin stood at the door. He was not looking at them. He was looking at the wall. His hands hung at his sides and they were shaking. He did not say anything. There was nothing to say. Solen stayed there for a long moment. Then she stood. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She walked to the armory terminal and opened a recorded channel. The message would go out on every encrypted frequency the human fleet could receive. It would reach the scattered remnant ships, the colony pockets, the silent stations still broadcasting their existence to the void. She looked into the camera. They know we are dangerous now. She paused. The words felt small in her mouth. They will try to burn us out of the sky. They will send their best ships and their brightest commanders, but they do not know the worst of it yet. They have not met the thing. It made us this way. She ended the recording. The armory was quiet. Maya sat breathing. Tobin stood frozen. The smell of ozone hung in the air like a promise. Solen looked at the empty glass case. The Mirathi would reorganize. They would hunt. They would find her again. But they would come slower now, more carefully, and they would never look at a human ship the same way again. She had turned her people into something the galaxy feared. She only wished it had cost her something she could afford to lose. Vethril-Kor stood at the center of the polished white floor. The council chamber smelled of recycled air and antiseptic. The cold seeped through the soles of his boots. The room was a perfect circle. Tiered seating rose around him like an amphitheater for judgment. 7 syndicate heads stared down from their elevated pods. Their faces were identical in their controlled neutrality. Their tapping fingers were not. Vethril had seen that rhythm before. It was the pattern for maximum alert, the highest corporate threat response. Trade speaker Lysitharven stood opposite him, his broad shoulders squared. His corporate tattoos were dark against the pale blue of his neck. He had not stopped vibrating with fury since the shuttle feed went dark. The lead syndicate head leaned forward. Her name was First Voice Kesathmir. Her eyes were black and depthless. "Explain the psychic attack," she said. Her voice carried no inflection. It did not need to. The room had gone silent. Lysitharven struck first. His hand slammed against the data podium. Human aggression, unprovoked. A breach of every diplomatic protocol. They attacked a corporate boarding action without warning. They used forbidden technology. They must be exterminated before they spread their chaos to every trade lane in the sector. Vethril let him finish. He waited until the echo of Lysitharven's voice faded into the sterile air. Then he stepped forward. "I have completed my analysis," he said, "the full findings." Kesathmir gestured. The main screen flickered to life. The image was old, grainy. It was reconstructed from fragments of human data storage. Vethril had spent 16 cycles piecing them together. It showed a planet from orbit. Blue oceans, white cloud bands, green continents. Beautiful. Earth, Vethril said, their homeworld before its destruction. The council watched, their tapping slowed. Vethril called up the geological records, the tectonic maps, tectonic instability on a scale no Mirathi world had ever experienced. The planet's crust was a patchwork of moving plates. They collided and ground against each other with constant violence. The surface trembled daily. Entire mountain ranges rose and fell in geological moments. He showed them the atmospheric data. Storm systems could swallow a continent. Winds stripped away the surface of islands. Temperature swings would kill any Mirathi in hours without shelter. He showed them the biological records. The council stopped tapping entirely. Pathogens, Vethril said, tens of thousands of distinct microbial species. They evolved to exploit human biology. The humans had no natural immunity to most of them. They survived by adaptation, by medicine, by learning to predict what their bodies could not withstand. He paused. Their immune systems were not a static defense. They were a constant war. Every human body fought 1,000 microscopic battles every cycle of its existence. Those unable to keep up died. The survivors passed their adaptability to their offspring. Lysitharven shifted his weight. What does this have to do with the psychic attack? Everything, Vethril said. He advanced the display. The humans evolved without a natural psionic safety net. Every other species in known space had one. A mental limiter. A dampening field preventing uncontrolled psionic output. It kept their minds safe from feedback. It kept their societies stable. The humans did not have this. Their creativity was not a gift. It was a survival trait. They learned to predict the unpredictable because their environment demanded it. Fail, and they died. When a predator emerged from the undergrowth, a human had a fraction of a heartbeat to decide, fight, flee, or outthink. They could not survive on instinct alone. Instinct was too slow, too rigid. So they adapted. They began to see patterns where patterns should not exist. They imagined outcomes with no precedent. They built tools for problems not yet emerged. Every child was born with a brain wired for invention, for improvisation, for the constant, exhausting work of staying alive in a universe. It had never cared whether they lived or died. Kesathmir's fingers lay flat on her console. "You are describing a species evolved for chaos." "Yes," Vethril said. He took a breath, and that is not the worst of it. He advanced the display again. The image shifted. Earth appeared again, but different. A scar crossed its equator. A wound in the crust glowed with residual heat. The oceans were gray. The clouds were black. "This is what the humans have been hiding," Vethril said. The destruction of their homeworld was not a natural disaster. The room temperature dropped, or perhaps it was Vethril's imagination. His skin had gone cold. "Earth was destroyed by a war," he said. "A war against a primordial chaos entity. The entity emerged from a place their records call the deep null. It is a dimension of pure, unmaking entropy between realities." He showed them the data, the energy signatures. Dimensional fractures still rippled through the space where Earth had once orbited. The readings matched nothing in Mirathi scientific catalogs. They matched nothing in any known database. The rootmine species have run from this threat for millennia. Every other species encountering this entity also fled. Vethril continued. The Abyssals, a race of non-corporeal energy beings, refused to engage. They simply vanished from any system the entity approached. The Flinchard, a silicon-based hive mind, shattered their own worlds rather than let them be consumed. They all ran. They scattered across the galaxy and hoped it would not follow. The humans did not run. The silence stretched. They fought it, Vethril said. They did not have the technology. They did not have the psionic capability. They did not have allies. They had nothing but their ability to look at an impossible problem. Then they found an answer that had never existed before. He highlighted the recovered logs, fragmented, damaged, but readable. They won, he said. The humans won the war, but they lost their homeworld. They became refugees, scattered, broken, desperate. He turned to face the council. They are the only species in known space to have successfully repelled a deep null incursion. The only species to have fought a void entity and survived. Lysithar Van slammed his hand on the table. The sound cracked through the room like a weapon discharge. Then they are too dangerous to exist. Vethril stared at him. The words hung in the sterile air. No, Vethril said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. You misunderstand. They are too dangerous not to exist. He gestured at the shattered image of Earth. They are the only weapon we have against what is coming. Kesathmir's voice cut through the tension. What do you mean, what is coming? Vethril opened his mouth. The alarms did not let him speak. The sound was a deep, rhythmic pulse. It vibrated through the deck plates, through the walls, through Vethril's chest. It was not a drill. The pattern was wrong. The pattern was one he had never heard in 30 years of service. Kesathmir's console lit up. Her eyes went wide. The void beacon, she said. The one left near the human fleet during negotiations. It has activated on its own frequency. She looked up. Something is answering the call. The bridge of the last argument shuddered. This was not the familiar vibration of stressed hull plates or misaligned engines. It was a resonance. It came from somewhere else entirely. A low thrum made the bones in Solen Brecken's jaw ache. The emergency lights flickered in staggered pulses. Tobin Wash was already at the sensor array. His grease-stained hands flew across a console. It had been rewired so many times the original manufacturer would not have recognized it. He stopped whistling. That was the first bad sign. The void beacon sat in its shielded container near the rear of the bridge. This was the strange, alien artifact her people used to communicate across impossible distances. The box was triple-layered lead composite. It should have blocked everything. The hum passed through it like the metal was not there. Solen flipped her coin across her knuckles. The motion was automatic. She did not look at her hands. "Talk to me, Tobin." He did not turn around. The beacon is singing. It is not supposed to sing. It has never sung before. Define singing. A pattern, a call. It is broadcasting on a frequency. I cannot trace it to any known species. It is not root-mind coding. It is not Mirathi. It is not anything I have ever seen. The ship vibrated again. This time the lights went dark for a full second before the emergency backups kicked in. Solen felt the hair on her arms stand up. The air changed. It tasted like ozone and something metallic like old blood. A proximity alarm screamed from the communications station. Tobin slapped it silent and pulled up the feed. His face went pale. A Mirathi scout ship on the edge of the system went dark. Its last transmission was a scream. It cut off mid-frequency. No debris, no escape pod signatures. The ship was simply gone. The bridge door hissed open. Security lead Morathvex stepped through with 2 armed Mirathi behind him. He did not carry a weapon. His hands were open and visible. His tattooed neck was tensed hard enough to show every tendon. "Commander Brecken, we have a problem." Solen did not take her eyes off the display. Which one? Morathvex stopped at the edge of her command station. He looked at the shielded container. He looked at the flickering lights. He looked at Tobin. The engineer was now running diagnostics with the desperate speed of a man outrunning disaster. "The beacon, you activated it." "We did not." "It is active." Solen turned to face him. Her voice was flat. "The beacon activates on its own. It always has. We do not control it. We barely contain it." Morathvex's shoulders rolled forward, a pre-fight loosening. He visibly tried to suppress it. "That object is a weapon, and you cannot control it. I am telling you it is a homing signal. It calls to something. We used it during the war." His black eyes widened. "During the war with the Rootmind." "Yes." You called the enemy here, to our space, to our systems. You used your beacon to draw the rootmind into Mirathi territory. Solen met his gaze. She did not look away. We did not build the beacon. We found it. Do you understand what that means? It was already here when we arrived. It was buried on a moon in a dead system. When we activated it, we learned something very fast. Mirathi stepped closer. His voice dropped. What did you learn? The only reason humanity is still alive is because we learned how to dance with what the beacon attracts. He stared at her. The silence stretched. The hum from the container grew louder. Tobin cursed under his breath and slammed his fist on the console. Something big is coming through the signal. Not one thing, many things. They are not rootmind. They are something else. The readings are wrong. They are cold. They are absolutely cold. The main display flickered and went dark. Then it came back. But the image was wrong. The starfield at the edge of the system was distorting. Space itself seemed to bend and ripple like the surface of a disturbed pond. A voice filled the bridge. It did not come through the speakers. It came from inside the hull, from inside the metal, from inside their bones. It was static and pressure. It was the sound of something vast turning its attention toward them. The agreement is broken. Humanity remains. The rest of you will be unmade. Mirathi took a step back. His hand went to his side, reaching for a weapon that was not there. What was that? What spoke? Solen felt the cold in her chest. She had heard that voice before, once, during the final evacuation of Earth. The sky had split open. Something had looked down at the fleeing ships and decided they were not worth destroying. She had always wondered why. Now she knew. The Abyssal, she said, a non-corporeal race of immense power. The thing that watched humanity and decided to let us run. Morathvex's voice cracked. For what reason? It made the agreement with us, Solen explained. It was a binding contract between our species. He stared, made an agreement. With humans, for what? Solen pointed at the display. The starfield at the edge of the system was breaking apart. Shapes were emerging. They were not ships. They were not organic. They were geometries. It hurt to look at them. They were angles. They should not exist in three-dimensional space. The agreement was simple. We stay in our systems. The Abyssal does not cross into ours. We do not come for it, and it does not come for us. But Earth is gone. Yes, the rootmind broke the agreement. They attacked Earth. The Abyssal did not stop them because the rootmind were not the Abyssal. The contract was with a different entity. Morathvex stared at her. His hands were shaking. His composure was gone. You drew the rootmind to us. You used your beacon as bait, and we were caught in the trap. Solen stepped toward him. Her voice was hard. We did not build the beacon. We did not choose to be hunted. We did not ask for the war, but we survived it. And the only reason you are still alive right now is because we are still here, still fighting, still standing between the void and everything it wants to consume. He opened his mouth, closed it. The hum from the container spiked. The lights went out completely. When they came back, the display showed a fleet emerging from the dark. Hundreds of them, thousands. The geometries twisted and folded and unfolded. The bridge grew so cold Solen could see her own breath. The abyssal fleet hung at the edge of the system, waiting. Solen looked at Morathvex. Her voice was calm. It was the calm of someone who had already accepted the worst and was simply waiting to see what came next. You have a choice. Stand with us or be consumed by the coming silence. Morathvex looked at the display. He looked at the shielded container. He looked at Tobin. The engineer was still running calculations. They clearly were not producing good numbers. He turned back to Solen. How do I know you will not sacrifice us? She held his gaze. Because we are the only ones who understand what is out there. And we are the only ones who know how to survive it. If we die, you die with us. The shapes at the edge of the system began to move. Solen Brecken stood at the center of the holographic light. The display cast sharp-edged shadows across the war room. Her worn metal coin was silent in her pocket for once. She needed both hands flat on the table to keep them steady. The abyssal fleet moved in a formation that made no tactical sense. Not cones, not wedges, not any pattern a Mirathi or human strategist would use. They spread like ink through water, a presence that did not understand battle but understood consumption. 40 ships for every one of theirs, maybe more. The room was too full. Human officers in mismatched uniforms stood beside Mirathi syndicate representatives in corporate silks. Security lead Morathvex leaned against the far wall with his arms crossed, watching the hologram with the flat stare of a man counting his own remaining hours. Solen pointed to the leading abyssal vessel, a wound in space held open by will. They will not form a picket, she said. They will not establish a perimeter. They will not exchange fire. They will simply press through our defenses until we are gone. Lysitharven stepped forward, the corporate tattoos on his neck catching the blue light of the hologram. He looked at the display, then at her with obvious contempt. You cannot fight this, he said. You know what comes from the deep null. You have seen it before. Surrender your ships, offer tribute, negotiate for mercy. Solen laughed. It was not a humorous sound. It was the dry scrape of a woman who had run out of reasons to pretend. You still do not understand, she said. We do not negotiate with chaos, we exploit it. Vethril-Kor tilted his head. His large black eyes did not blink. Explain that, he said. Solen pulled a datapad from her belt and laid it on the table. The hologram shifted, zooming out to show the entire sector. Tiny markers flickered across the display. Human fleet remnants, colony fragments, deep space listening posts. Each one was a pinprick of light scattered across 1,000 star systems. She had never shown this to any alien before. She had never planned to. The diaspora was not a rout, she said. It was a controlled explosion. She touched the datapad. The markers began to pulse in sequence, and a pattern emerged from the chaos, a web that spanned a quarter of the known galaxy. Every human fleet carries a fragment of the old war, she said. A data core with abyssal combat analysis, a weapon schematic keyed to their vulnerabilities, a beacon fragment tuned to their signature. We scattered ourselves. We became so thin the enemy could never find all of us at once. Lysitharven's tapping fingers went still. You are the remnants of a dead species, he said. You are refugees. Solen met his gaze and held it until he looked away. We are the galaxy's immune system, she said, and we have been spreading for 40 years. The room went silent. The only sound was the low hum of the engines straining at maximum output, and somewhere in the corner, a human engineer sharpening a blade. The rhythmic scrape of metal on stone was the only thing that felt real. Vethril-Kor stepped closer to the hologram, his pale blue hands hovering over the light, tracing the web of markers. You planned this, he said. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. You planned to draw us into your war. Solen nodded once. We needed an ally with stable logistics, she said. A species that could build the weapons we designed but could not manufacture ourselves in transit. You have factories. You have supply chains. You have a network that spans half the galaxy. She turned to face the room, the holographic light painting her face in cold blues and deep blacks. We are the scalpel, she said. You are the forge. Together we will cut out the rot. Morath Vex pushed off the wall. His scarred face was unreadable, but his shoulders had dropped from their fighting role. He was no longer bracing for a human betrayal. He was bracing for the truth of what they actually were. You used us, he said. It was not a question. It was a statement. We conned you, Solen said. There was no apology in her voice. We let you think we were broken so you would not look too closely at what we were carrying. Lysitharven slammed his palm on the table. The hologram flickered. You have doomed us, he hissed. You have brought the abyssal to our territory deliberately. You have made us a target by proximity alone. Solen did not flinch. You were already a target, she said. The abyssal does not distinguish between species. It consumes everything. Your ships, your trade routes, your corporate headquarters. The only difference between your future and ours is that we have been fighting it long enough to know how to hurt it. She looked at Vethril-Kor. His fingers were tapping a slow rhythm against his thigh, processing, analyzing, recalculating every assumption he had made about humanity since the first moment he saw them drift into the system. You are not desperate, he said quietly. You are hunting. Solen reached into her pocket and pulled out the worn metal coin. She flipped it across her knuckles once, twice. The motion was automatic, a habit she could not break. We are hunting, she agreed, and we just conscripted you into our war without giving you a real choice. The blade in the corner stopped scraping. The engineer looked up. He was young, his hands stained with grease and blood. He met Solen's eyes and nodded once. She turned back to the hologram. The abyssal fleet was closer now, hours away at most. She opened a channel to every ship in the system. The comms frequency hummed as it connected. Human vessels, Mirathi freighters, independent traders, anyone with an active receiver. This is Commander Solen Brecken of the Human Continuity Fleet. Her voice was steady, flat, controlled, the way she had learned to speak over the graves of 1 billion people. We are the survivors of a war you do not understand. We are offering you a choice. Stand with us or be consumed by the silence that is coming." The ship shuddered. A sustained volley from the starboard battery sent vibrations through the deck plates. Vethril-Kor felt them in his bones. He stood at the rear of the bridge, pressed against a wall covered in exposed wiring and hastily installed Mirathi display panels. The last argument groaned around him like a living thing in pain. Solène Brecken stood at the center of the chaos. She did not shout. She did not flinch. She watched the tactical display with a deep stillness, a woman who had already accepted every possible outcome. "Morath Vex, pull your squadron left," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "They are overextending on the flank." Morath Vex acknowledged from his position on the Mirathi command vessel. His voice came through the comms, strained but steady. "We are losing cohesion. Their formations adapt faster than ours." "They do," Solène said simply, "so stop forming up." The words hung in the air for a moment. Then she turned to Tobin Wash, who sat at a jury-rigged console with a datapad balanced on his knee. "Tobin, broadcast to all units. Human and Mirathi, every ship becomes its own element. No formations, no battle lines, we swarm them." Tobin's fingers moved across the console. "Broadcasting now, you want a single wave or staggered?" "Staggered by 12 seconds, and tell the pilots to treat their ships like ammunition, not transport." Vethril's throat tightened. He stepped forward. "Commander, you are ordering our forces to disintegrate." Solène looked at him. Her eyes were tired but clear. "I am ordering them to be unpredictable. The Abyssal can adapt to any tactic it has seen before. It cannot adapt to something new every 12 seconds. It is a thinking enemy, so we stop thinking and start reacting." The first wave of human ships broke formation. Vethril watched the tactical feed, a hand pressed against the bulkhead for balance. The small human vessels moved without pattern, their paths defying conventional logic. They did not attack the abyssal cruisers head-on. They slid between them, using the larger enemy ships as shields against each other. A human fighter dove directly at an abyssal cruiser's primary sensor array. The cruiser tried to track it. The fighter spun, rolled, and ejected its pilot at the last possible moment. The empty ship slammed into the array, and the cruiser's sensors went dark. Another human ship had already curved around to catch the drifting pilot. The whole maneuver took under 20 seconds. They planned that, Vethril realized. They planned for that possibility. The Mirathi crews on the tactical channel went silent. Someone on one of the corporate ships let out a breath that sounded like a question. A human pilot laughed over the open comms, the sound bright and reckless. "That was close," the pilot said. "Did anyone get that on recording?" Tobin Wash shook his head. He was smiling. Vethril had never seen a human smile during a battle before. It was not a happy expression. It was something else, something hungry. The abyssal fleet hesitated. Vethril saw it on the display. The fluid, ink-like formation stopped its forward push. The individual ships began to pulse, contracting and expanding, seeming to process data that did not fit. The abyssal had never faced chaos it could not predict and absorb. Solène saw it too. She reached into a compartment beneath her console and pulled out the void beacon. The obsidian sphere sat in her hands, its geometric lines shifting and glowing with a faint blue light. "Tobin, give me the resonance key on Channel 7. Tobin's hands moved. "Channel 7 active, you are live." Solène held the beacon up. Her fingers found a pattern of indentations on its surface and pressed them in sequence. The beacon's hum deepened until Vethril could feel it in his teeth. "They want order," Solène said, "so let us give them a question they cannot answer." She pressed the final indentation. The beacon released a pulse. Vethril felt it pass through him, a cold wave that left no physical trace but made his thoughts stumble for a fraction of a second. The pulse hit the abyssal fleet. The effect was immediate. The pulsing formations froze. Every abyssal ship went still, caught in the middle of a movement it could not complete. The fluid shapes crystallized into rigid geometric forms. Solène did not wait. All units strike the frozen targets, full power, no mercy. The combined fleet opened fire. Vethril watched the abyssal ships shatter. They did not explode. They cracked like ice under a hammer, then dissolved into the void, the ink-like substance scattering into drifting particles. The tactical display showed the abyssal formation breaking apart. The remaining ships began to retreat, pulling back toward the distortion at the edge of the system. The wound in space started to close. Solène turned to Vethril. Her face was pale, sweat beading on her forehead. "It worked," she said, "for now." Vethril stared at the display. The last of the abyssal ships vanished. The starfield returned to normal. The bridge was silent except for the hum of strained systems. "What happens now?" he asked. Solène looked at the void beacon in her hands. The obsidian sphere had gone dark, its geometric lines still. "Now we find the others," she said, "and we build something new, something the abyssal cannot predict." She placed the beacon back in its container and closed the lid. The war was not over, but for the first time in 40 years, humanity had won a battle. And Vethril-Kor understood what that meant. He had seen what humans did when they were desperate. Now he would see what they did when they had hope. That thought was the most terrifying thing of all.